The unexpected encounter, the Interstellar trade hub, floated silently above a dying red star. A vast ring of shining metal and glass where thousands of species crossed paths. Ships of every shape and size drifted in and out of its docking bays, carrying goods, secrets, and trouble. Among the endless noise of alien tongues, the clanging of machinery, and the shimmering neon lights, a single human moved quietly through the chaos, his head bent over a damaged cargo module that refused to power up. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead and muttered under his breath, annoyed at the faulty circuits. Humans were rare here, almost invisible among the tall, scaled merchants, insectoid traders, and armored guards that filled the station's decks. Most beings barely noticed him, and Ethan preferred it that way. He was an engineer, not a soldier or a diplomat, and all he wanted was to finish his job and return to his small rented quarters before the station's artificial night cycle began. But fate had other plans. Out of the corner of his eye, Ethan noticed movement, fast, desperate, and wrong. A figure was pushing through the crowd, weaving between towering alien merchants and metallic security drones. At first he thought it was just another panicked traveler, but then he saw her face. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly under the station's lights, pale silver touched with soft patterns that moved like liquid beneath the surface. Her eyes, sharp and glowing faintly violet, scanned the crowd with a mixture of fear and determination. Her dark hair was braided tightly against her head, and she wore a cloak lined with symbols Ethan didn't recognize. The strangest thing was the way people moved aside when she passed, avoiding her gaze as though she carried danger in her shadow. Before Ethan could react, she spotted him. And in that instant, her entire expression changed. Relief mixed with raw desperation. She came straight at him. Before he could step back or say a word, her hand grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. She leaned close, her voice low but trembling as she whispered fast, almost choking on the words, "Marry me now, or my brothers will kill you." Ethan blinked, thinking he had misheard her over the noise of the station. "What?" Her grip tightened, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "Listen to me. You don't understand. You touched me. They saw it. If we don't perform the bond, they will hunt you down and end you, right here. Right now." "I touched you?" he stammered, completely lost. He glanced at his hand, realizing she was right. When she'd stumbled into him moments ago in the crowd, his palm had brushed her shoulder without thinking. He hadn't even noticed. But apparently, someone else had. Ethan was about to protest when a shadow fell across them. 3 towering figures appeared at the edge of the crowd, their forms draped in heavy armor lined with jagged scars. Each carried a weapon strapped across their back, long spears tipped with plasma edges that glimmered faintly under the station's lights. Their faces were sharp and angular, marked with the same liquid-like silver patterns as the girls, but their eyes burned brighter, pulsing faintly with deep crimson energy, and they were looking directly at him. The girl pulled Ethan sharply to the side, pushing through a cluster of merchants, and leading him down a narrow corridor lit by flickering blue panels. He stumbled after her, his mind a storm of confusion. "Who are you?" he whispered as they ran. "What's going on? Why would they kill me?" "My name is Lyra," she said quickly, glancing over her shoulder. "And those are my brothers. We are Cathari, a warrior clan. Our customs are ancient, older than this station itself. If a man touches an unbound Cathari female, there are only 2 choices. He accepts the bond, or he dies. There is no third path." "That's insane," Ethan said, breathing hard as they turned another corner. "I didn't mean to touch you. I didn't even know. They won't care," she cut him off. "They've been hunting for an excuse to spill blood ever since we arrived here. You are human. They already see you as weak. If we don't do this, you won't survive the next 5 minutes." Ethan stopped abruptly, pulling his hand free from her grip. He leaned against the metal wall, trying to catch his breath and process what she was saying. You're asking me to marry you, a stranger, on the spot, just to keep from being killed by your brothers? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but there was no hesitation in her voice when she said, yes. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. He could hear distant footsteps echoing through the corridor, heavy, purposeful, closing in. His heart pounded as he realized she wasn't exaggerating. These weren't empty threats. If what she said was true, those 3 armored giants were coming to kill him. Something in Lyra's tone made him believe her, even though every part of his mind screamed that this was madness. He glanced back the way they had come and saw a flicker of movement, a glimmer of crimson light bouncing off metal. They were closer now. You're serious, he said softly. Lyra nodded once. Do you want to live? The answer should have been obvious, but Ethan hesitated, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. If what she said about the bond was true, this wasn't a simple lie to fool her brothers. It was an ancient ritual, something permanent. He didn't know what it meant, what it would do to him, or what kind of world he would be dragged into. He was just an engineer from a quiet human colony, and now he was standing on the edge of something far bigger than himself. The footsteps grew louder. Fine, he said finally, his voice low but steady. Tell me what to do. Lyra exhaled, relief flashing briefly across her face. Follow me. Don't hesitate. Don't speak unless I tell you to. She led him through a winding maze of corridors until they reached a dimly lit chamber, lined with glowing symbols etched into the walls. At the center stood a circular platform carved from black stone, its surface pulsing faintly with energy. Lyra stepped onto it, motioning for Ethan to join her. This is an old bonding altar, she explained quickly. It links our life signatures. Once it's done, they can't harm you without dishonoring the clan. Ethan hesitated for just a moment before stepping up beside her. The stone beneath his boots vibrated softly, as though alive. Lyra placed her hand over a shallow groove in the center, and the altar responded with a low hum. A thin beam of silver light rose between them. Repeat after me, she whispered, her voice trembling now despite her earlier confidence. Before he could ask what the words meant, the chamber door slid open with a hiss. The 3 brothers filled the entrance, their weapons drawn, their crimson eyes burning. Ethan swallowed hard. Whatever was about to happen next would change his life forever. The blood oath of the Cathari clan, the chamber's air turned heavy the moment the 3 towering warriors stepped inside. Their armor caught the faint glow of the symbols on the walls, casting strange reflections across the dark stone floor. They moved with quiet precision, their expressions hard and unyielding, crimson eyes burning like molten glass. Each carried a spear slung casually across his back, but even without touching their weapons, their presence alone radiated danger. Ethan stood frozen beside Lyra, his throat dry, his mind racing for some way out of this madness. The tallest of the 3 brothers stepped forward, his boots striking the stone with a deliberate rhythm. His silver-patterned skin caught the light like liquid metal, and when he spoke, his voice carried the deep rumble of restrained fury. You dare bring an outsider to the altar, he said, his gaze locked on Ethan. You dare bond with prey. Lyra moved in front of Ethan before he could answer, standing between him and her brothers like a shield. Her voice was steady, even though Ethan could see her hand trembling slightly at her side. He touched me, she said, her tone sharp. By our law, the choice has been made. To strike him now would shame us before the ancestors. The second brother, broader and younger, bared his teeth in frustration. The law protects him. Only if he completes the oath. If he fails the ritual, his life is ours. Lyra nodded once, acknowledging the truth of his words, and then turned to Ethan, her violet eyes steady on his. "Do not falter," she whispered. "Whatever happens, do not hesitate. If you hesitate, they will kill you before you take another breath." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding slowly. His heart pounded against his ribs, but he forced himself to step forward until he stood beside her on the altar. He tried to look calm, though every instinct screamed at him to run. But there was no escape now. The eldest brother approached and drew a small curved blade from his belt, its edge shimmering faintly as if it were alive. He handed it to Lyra with a curt nod and began to chant in a language Ethan didn't understand. The symbols on the walls pulsed in response, their glow growing stronger with each syllable. Lyra turned the blade in her hand and held it out to Ethan. "A single cut," she said softly. "Blood binds the vow. Blood seals the oath." Ethan hesitated only for a moment before taking the blade. It felt unnaturally warm in his hand, almost pulsing with energy. He drew it across his palm, just enough to break the skin, and hissed, as a thin line of blood welled up. Lyra did the same, her silver-patterned skin parting easily under the blade. When she placed her hand over his, their blood mingled, and the altar beneath them reacted instantly. A soft vibration rolled through the floor, followed by a low hum that rose steadily in pitch. The thin beam of light between them flared brighter, shifting from silver to an intense pale blue, and Ethan felt a strange sensation ripple through his body, like static crawling beneath his skin, like something deep within him was awakening. Brothers watched in silence, their crimson eyes narrowing. The second one shifted uneasily, his gaze darting between Ethan's face and the glowing altar. The youngest muttered something under his breath that Ethan couldn't hear, but Lyra stiffened at his words. "This shouldn't be happening," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "What shouldn't be happening?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. Before she could answer, the energy around them surged violently, washing through the chamber like a wave. The symbols on the walls blazed brighter than ever, filling the space with a cold, shimmering light. Ethan stumbled slightly, but didn't let go of Lyra's hand. He felt something strange pulling at him, not physically but deep inside, as though the altar were reaching into his very DNA and reading it like a book. The eldest brother's expression hardened, his voice low and wary. "Human blood should not react to the binding stone," he said, almost to himself. "This is not natural." Lyra's grip tightened around Ethan's hand, and she leaned closer so only he could hear her. "Do not show fear," she whispered. "If they sense weakness now, they will strike." Ethan forced himself to stand straighter, clenching his jaw as the energy pulsed harder. He had no idea what was happening, but it was too late to turn back. The light grew so bright it hurt to keep his eyes open, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the glow faded, leaving the chamber in a deep, quiet stillness. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the altar released a soft chime, and the symbols on the walls dimmed to their normal glow. "The bond is sealed," Lyra said firmly, turning to face her brothers. "By the law of the Cathari, he is untouchable." The second brother snarled, clearly displeased, but he didn't move against. Ethan, the youngest, however, stepped forward, his crimson gaze full of hostility. "The law may bind us," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "but it does not bind the shadows. Accidents happen in the depths beyond this station. I will not forget his weakness." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression neutral. Showing fear now would only feed their hatred. Lyra stepped between them, her voice like steel. "Touch him, and you dishonor our bloodline. Do you seek exile, Kale?" The youngest glared at her but said nothing, finally stepping back into the shadows near the door. Ethan exhaled slowly, thinking it was over, but he saw the way the brothers' eyes lingered on him as they left the chamber. There was no victory here, only a fragile truce. Lyra turned back to him, her face unreadable. "You are safe for now," she said quietly. "But you need to understand, they will come for you when no one is watching. Tonight, tomorrow, or a year from now, they will not forget this insult." Ethan rubbed his still tingling palm and frowned. "And you? Why did you choose me? There were 1,000 others in that crowd." For the first time she hesitated. "Because you are human," she said finally, her voice low. "Because your kind does not belong here." The Cathari believe humans carry chaos in their blood, a force the ancestors feared and respected. That is why the altar reacted as it did. They are terrified of you, though they will never admit it. Ethan stared at her, processing her words. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, just another engineer trying to survive far from home. But if what she was saying was true, then simply being human made him a threat to one of the most powerful warrior clans in this sector. Before he could respond, a sharp alarm blared across the station, echoing through the corridors. Lyra's expression darkened instantly. "They know," she whispered. "Know what?" Ethan asked, his chest tightening. "That the bond was not normal," she said, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the exit. "They will summon the hunters. We have to move, now." Ethan stumbled after her, his thoughts spinning, the echo of crimson eyes and glowing symbols still burning in his mind. Whatever he had been dragged into, it was no longer just about surviving her brothers. Something far older, far more dangerous, had awakened, and it was tied to him now, whether he wanted it or not. As they disappeared into the winding corridors of the station, shadows moved quietly behind them. The hunt had already begun. Hunted across the stars, the station's corridors stretched endlessly, twisting like veins of steel and glass lit by the dull red glow of warning lights. Ethan followed, close behind Lyra as she led him through narrow maintenance tunnels where the air smelled of ozone and burnt circuits. The alarm that had begun near the bonding chamber still echoed faintly in the distance, a low droning sound that seemed to follow them wherever they went. Every time they turned a corner, Ethan expected to see crimson-eyed warriors waiting in ambush, but so far, the passages were empty. He struggled to keep pace with Lyra, his lungs burning as they ran. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "To the lower levels," she said without slowing down. "There are places even the Cathari hunters avoid. If we reach the old power cores, we can disappear." Hunters, the word stuck in his mind like a blade. He had already seen what Lyra's brothers were capable of, and he didn't need an explanation to understand that the hunters would be worse. Trained killers bred for one purpose. Ethan didn't know how far they would go to erase what they had seen at the altar, but from the fear in Lyra's voice, he guessed they would stop at nothing. They turned sharply into a dim shaft lined with cables and hanging pipes, ducking beneath loose wires sparking faintly with blue energy. Somewhere far above, machinery thrummed like a heartbeat, but down here the station felt different, darker, abandoned, forgotten. "You said the altar reacted to me," Ethan said between breaths, his voice low but urgent. "What did you mean by that? What does it mean?" Lyra hesitated as if deciding how much to tell him. Finally she slowed slightly and glanced over her shoulder. The Cathari believed the bonding altar was built by the first ones, an ancient species lost to time. Its energy is supposed to respond only to us, to our bloodlines. But when you touched it, something awakened. Something older than the Cathari. Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "And that scares them? It terrifies them," she said quietly. "For thousands of years, the Cathari have believed they were chosen, created to rule, their blood sacred. If a human can command the altar's energy, it shatters everything they believe about themselves. That's why my brothers wanted to kill you. That's why the hunters are coming now." Ethan processed her words in silence, his mind flashing back to the strange sensation during the ritual. the energy crawling under his skin, the feeling that the altar had been reaching into him. It was no coincidence. Something deep inside him had triggered it, something he didn't understand and wasn't sure he wanted to. Suddenly, a faint metallic clatter echoed behind them, far down the corridor. Lyra stopped immediately, raising a hand for silence. Ethan held his breath and strained his ears. A second later, he heard it, the soft scrape of armored boots against metal. "They're close," she whispered. She grabbed his hand and pulled him through a narrow hatch leading into an even smaller passageway where the walls were so tight they had to move sideways. Ethan's chest brushed against rusted pipes as they squeezed through, his heart hammering in his chest. "How do they even know where we're going?" he asked softly. "They don't need to know," she replied. "They can track the bond now. Your blood carries the mark. Wherever you go, they will feel it." "That's great," he muttered under his breath. But Lyra shot him a sharp look, and he fell silent. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a massive cavern-like chamber deep beneath the station. Broken machinery lay scattered across the floor. Huge power coils split open and leaking faint arcs of dying energy. The air was heavy with the scent of burning metal, and the only light came from faint green emergency strips along the walls. "This is the abandoned power core," Lyra said, scanning the shadows carefully. "Few dare to come here. Too unstable. Too dangerous. We'll rest for a moment." Ethan collapsed onto a piece of broken plating, running a hand through his damp hair. His body ached, but his mind refused to rest. Every sound, every vibration in the metal around them made him tense, expecting an ambush. Lyra stood at the edge of the chamber, watching the dark tunnels that led deeper into the station's underbelly. Even in the faint light, Ethan could see the way her shoulders remained stiff, her hand hovering near the small blade at her side. "You keep saying hunters," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "What exactly are they?" She turned toward him, her expression grim. "The hunters are the silent arm of the Cathari clans. They are raised from birth to eliminate threats before anyone else even knows they exist. No hesitation, no mercy, no witnesses. And they're coming for me," Ethan said quietly. Lyra nodded once. "Not just you, me too. By helping you, I've already defied my clan. They will see me as a traitor." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Somewhere in the distance, deep in the tunnels, a low hum began to rise, steady, unnatural, mechanical. Lyra's head snapped toward the sound immediately. "They've released the Seekers," she said sharply. "Move." Before Ethan could ask what Seekers were, he saw it, a small sphere hovering silently into the chamber from one of the tunnels. Its surface was black glass, but faint red lights pulsed beneath it, scanning the room in a grid pattern. Lyra grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him behind a collapsed power coil, crouching low. She motioned for silence and pointed to the other side of the chamber. Two more spheres drifted in from separate tunnels, their scanning lights sweeping methodically across the floor. The Seekers paused for a moment, as though listening, and then the first one's red light turned a brilliant crimson. "They've locked on," Lyra hissed. "Run." Ethan didn't hesitate. They bolted from cover, sprinting toward another tunnel as the Seekers emitted a high-pitched whine and streaked after them. The narrow passage ahead twisted sharply, forcing them to slide down a sloped section slick with condensation. Ethan nearly lost his footing but caught himself at the last second, Lyra pulling him upright before they kept moving. Behind them, the Seekers accelerated, the air vibrating faintly with their energy fields. Sparks danced along the walls as they powered up their weapons, firing thin lances of plasma that scorched the metal just inches from Ethan's shoulder. "Left!" Lyra shouted, and they ducked into another side passage, the Seekers skidding past before doubling back. They kept running until Ethan's lungs burned and his legs screamed in protest. But there was no stopping. Every time they gained distance, the Seekers adjusted, recalibrating, always closing in again. Finally, Lyra pulled Ethan through a half-collapsed hatch into a hidden maintenance shaft. She slammed the panel behind them, cutting off the Seekers' line of sight. For a moment, there was only silence and the sound of their ragged breathing. "They'll find another way in soon," she said, her voice low but steady. "We can't stay here long." Ethan leaned against the wall, trying to calm his racing heart. "How much longer can we keep running?" Lyra met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Until we find a way to make them stop," she said simply. "And how exactly do we do that?" She hesitated, then said, "There's only one way. You have to prove yourself before the clan, not just my brothers. All of them. If you survive their trials, the hunters cannot touch you." Ethan stared at her, incredulous. "Survive their trials? Against a species built for war? You are human," she said softly, almost reverently. "You don't understand what that means to them yet. They fear you for a reason. Whatever you awakened in the altar, it might be the only thing keeping us alive." Her words hung in the air as distant metallic echoes crept closer through the tunnels. The hunters were closing in, and Ethan realized the chase was far from over. They would have to face the Cathari head-on. The arena of honor, the tunnels finally betrayed them. After hours of running, slipping through hidden shafts and dodging Seekers, Ethan and Lyra emerged into a wide service corridor, where the metal walls curved high above their heads. The air was heavy and damp, carrying the faint hum of the station's massive engines. Lyra paused just long enough to scan the branching passages when a faint click echoed behind them. Ethan turned, and his stomach dropped. 6 Cathari hunters stepped out of the shadows, their armor dark as midnight, and their crimson eyes glowing faintly beneath hooded helms. Each carried a weapon shaped like a spear crossed with a blade, the edges shimmering faintly with a charged field. They moved as one, their boots silent on the metal floor, their presence cold and merciless. Lyra stepped instinctively in front of Ethan, her hand on her blade, but she knew as well as he did that it was useless. Against 6 hunters there was no chance. The lead hunter's voice came through a voice filter, flat and devoid of emotion. "The bond is unclean. The altar has spoken. You both will face judgment before the clan." Before Ethan could protest, something struck his neck, a sharp electric jolt, and the world went black. When he woke, his body ached. Cold air bit at his skin, and faint blue light washed over his vision. As his eyes adjusted, Ethan found himself standing inside a colossal arena, its circular walls rising hundreds of meters into the air. Towering metal pillars surrounded him, and beyond them sat tier after tier of Cathari spectators, their silver-patterned skin reflecting the arena lights. Thousands of glowing crimson eyes stared down at him in silence. Across the sandy floor, Lyra stood near one of the gates, her hands bound with shimmering restraints. She looked unharmed but tense, her gaze locked on Ethan. He didn't need words to understand. This wasn't just a test. This was a trial by death. And amplified voice thundered through the arena, vibrating through the floor beneath his boots. "By decree of the Cathari clans, the outsider shall face the trial of honor. If he survives, his life and bond are recognized. If he fails, his blood feeds the stones." The crowd erupted in a deep, resonant chant that rolled like thunder across the arena. Ethan clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe steadily, but his mind spun with dread. He was just an engineer. He had never trained for combat, never fought anyone, and now he stood alone beneath the gaze of an entire warrior race. The first gate opened with a metallic groan, and a towering Cathari warrior stepped onto the arena floor. His armor gleamed faintly, and his spear pulsed with low energy. Unlike the hunters, this warrior bore ceremonial markings across his chest and arms, glowing symbols etched into his very skin. His eyes locked on Ethan with predatory focus. Ethan's throat went dry as he glanced around for a weapon. A rack of various tools and blades was mounted on a nearby pillar, clearly meant for him to choose from. He reached instinctively for a staff-like weapon, light but sturdy, hoping it would at least give him reach. The horn sounded, and the warrior lunged. Ethan barely dodged the first strike, the spear's energy slicing the air so close it left a heat trail. He stumbled but recovered, forcing himself to remember every lesson he had ever learned about leverage, momentum, and engineering mechanics. The Cathari warrior was stronger, faster, and better trained. But Ethan had one advantage: unpredictability. As the warrior struck again, Ethan ducked low and used the staff to hook the back of his opponent's knee. The move surprised the Cathari, throwing him off balance just long enough for Ethan to swing the staff into his opponent's armored chest. It barely dented the plating, but the crowd roared with a mix of shock and approval. Lyra watched from the edge, her bound hands curling into fists, her lips moving silently as though willing him to keep fighting. The Cathari warrior recovered quickly, his crimson eyes glowing brighter. He circled Ethan, moving faster now, his spear blurring through the air. Ethan took hit after hit against his staff, each impact vibrating painfully through his arms. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Then he remembered the altar. That strange energy had responded to him before, as though recognizing something within his blood. He focused, breathing deeply, trying to feel that same crawling sensation under his skin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, the staff in his hand began to hum. A soft vibration rolled through it, and arcs of pale blue light danced briefly along its edges. The Cathari warrior hesitated, his eyes narrowing in confusion. That single moment was all Ethan needed. He twisted aside from the next strike and slammed the charged end of the staff into the warrior's exposed side. Energy crackled between them, and the Cathari dropped to one knee with a sharp grunt. The crowd erupted in a roar, their voices shaking the arena. But it wasn't over. The second gate opened, and two more warriors stepped out. One carried dual blades that shimmered with plasma edges, while the other bore a massive hammer designed to crush through armor. Ethan's chest tightened as he realized this wasn't a single duel. It was a gauntlet. He fought with everything he had, dodging and weaving as the blades came dangerously close, the hammer smashing craters into the arena floor where he had stood seconds before. Every move was survival, every strike improvised. He used the terrain, knocking loose shards of metal to trip his opponents, forcing them into each other's paths, never staying still long enough to become an easy target. Somehow, impossibly, he survived the second round. By now, murmurs rippled through the crowd, a mix of awe and unease. Lyra's brothers sat near the arena's high platform, their expressions dark and stormy. They had expected this to be over quickly, but Ethan kept rising, defying every expectation. Then the final gate opened. From the shadows stepped a warrior, unlike any other, taller than the rest, his armor blackened and scarred from 100 battles. His spear was shaped from a strange metallic crystal, its edge glowing faintly with crimson energy. The crowd fell silent as he entered, for everyone knew his name without speaking it. Kalim, champion of the Cathari, undefeated in all trials. Ethan's legs trembled as the champion approached, his presence heavy and overwhelming. "You are not one of us," Kalim said softly, his voice carrying easily across the arena. "Yet, you awaken what sleeps beneath our blood. Show me, human, if you deserve the life you claim." The horn sounded, and Kalim struck with speed that defied his size. Ethan barely blocked, the impact jolting up his arm so hard he thought the bones would snap. Sparks danced across the floor, the staff in his hand shaking violently as if resisting the champion's weapon. Every blow was faster, harder, more precise than before. Ethan's vision blurred with sweat and exhaustion, But somewhere deep within, the strange energy flared again, pushing him to move just a fraction quicker, react just a little sharper. He didn't understand it, but it was the only reason he was still alive. Finally, Kalen thrust forward with enough force to drive Ethan back against a cracked pillar. At the last second, Ethan twisted aside, redirecting the spear's energy into the pillar itself. The crystal edge sank deep, wedging tightly, and before Kalen could free it, Ethan slammed the charged staff into his chest. The blast sent the champion skidding across the arena floor, his armor smoking, his spear still buried in the stone. Silence fell. Then the crowd roared louder than before, a tidal wave of sound shaking the walls. Ethan collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath, his staff still humming faintly with energy he didn't understand. Across the arena, Kalen slowly rose, his expression unreadable. He stared at Ethan for a long moment, then raised one hand and slammed it against his chest in a gesture of respect. The trial was over, but as Ethan looked up at the tiers of crimson eyes staring down at him, he knew this wasn't victory. The arena had revealed something far greater than strength. It had revealed fear, and the Cathari feared him, now more than ever. The awakening below the silence inside the arena carried a strange weight. Thousands of Cathari watched from the towering seats above, their glowing crimson eyes fixed on the human who had just defeated their undefeated champion. Ethan stood at the center of the vast stone floor, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath, the staff still humming faintly in his hands as though alive. Kalen, the champion, stood across from him, no longer holding his spear. His expression was calm, but behind his sharp gaze lay something Ethan had never expected to see in a warrior so feared: curiosity. High above the arena, the Council of Elders sat in a raised chamber. Among them were Lyra's brothers, their faces dark and cold, their plans clearly shattered. This was meant to be Ethan's execution, a quick demonstration of Cathari dominance. Instead, he had survived, and that survival challenged everything. They believed. A deep voice from the elder platform finally broke the silence. The bond between the outsider and Lyra cannot be denied. He has passed the trial of honor. By our law, his life is his own, and his claim is recognized. Gasps rippled across the tiers of Cathari, but before anyone could speak, the floor beneath Ethan trembled slightly. It was faint at first, almost like a vibration, but then the hum grew deeper, resonating through the walls, the pillars, even the air itself. Lyra's eyes widened in sudden realization. "It is waking," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan turned to her. "What's waking?" She didn't answer because the answer came for everyone at once. The arena floor began to split, seams of ancient stone shifting apart as blue-white light erupted from deep below. A low, mechanical rumble filled the air, and strange patterns appeared on the walls, glowing softly like veins of energy. The chanting crowd fell silent, their cries dying into hushed disbelief. From beneath the sands, a massive construct began to rise, a vast circular machine of alien design, covered in symbols that pulsed faintly with each vibration. Kalen took a step forward, his usually calm voice tight with alarm. "The Sentinel is waking. That is impossible. It has been dormant for thousands of cycles." Lyra stared at the machine with both awe and fear. No Cathari has ever been able to wake it. The legends say only the first ones could command the Sentinel, and the first ones are long gone. Ethan felt the staff in his hands grow hotter, the faint hum becoming stronger until it nearly vibrated out of his grip. The energy that had saved him in the fight now surged wildly, as though the machine below recognized him, calling to something buried deep in his blood. Suddenly, the Sentinel's voice thundered in the minds of everyone present. It was not sound but thought, clear, ancient, and overwhelming. Designation detected. Human. Genetic signature confirmed. Primary directive engaged. The arena froze. Thousands of crimson eyes turned toward Ethan. Lyra's brothers stood, their shock breaking through their usual composure. "This cannot be," one of them hissed. "The humans were erased. The first ones destroyed them." The Sentinel's voice continued, calm and unrelenting. "Error. Historical record correction required. Humanity designated as architects. Cathari is designated as guardians. System protocols compromised. Restarting chain of command authority." Kellen's eyes widened as realization settled over him. "Architects," he muttered under his breath. "The humans created us." A deep, uneasy murmur rippled across the entire arena, spreading like fire through dry grass. For generations, the Cathari had believed themselves to be the pinnacle of evolution, the chosen warriors of the stars. To discover that their existence was engineered, and by the bloodline of the man standing before them, shook the very core of their identity. Lyra looked at Ethan, her voice soft but full of awe. Your people made ours." Before Ethan could process her words, the Sentinel spoke again, louder this time, vibrating the entire arena. Double quotes chain of command transferred. "New directives available. Warning. Outer rim incursion detected. Hostile entities approaching. Defense protocols pending authorization." Ethan blinked in confusion. Defense protocols? Wait, I don't understand, but the Sentinel wasn't waiting for him to understand. Beneath their feet, massive conduits lit up as energy surged through the machine. Somewhere deep below the arena, systems older than any Cathari memory were awakening, their purpose bound to humanity's lost commands. Lyra's brothers stepped forward, their anger barely restrained. "You think we will kneel to an outsider? Just because some ancient machine claims he carries the blood of our makers?" One of them snarled, his voice amplified across the arena. Kalen turned his head slowly, his stance tall and commanding. "You saw it as clearly as I did. The Sentinel obeys him. Denying this truth will not change it." The argument between the warriors grew louder, the crowd splitting into factions, some shouting in defense of their traditions, others calling for acceptance of the revelation. Chaos threatened to erupt, but before it could, the Sentinel's final message cut through the turmoil like a blade. "Warning. Hostile fleets inbound. Planetary defenses offline. Immediate unification required, or extinction probability exceeds 99%. The words struck like thunder. Whatever differences divided them, a greater danger was approaching. Kalen turned to Ethan, his crimson eyes now steady and resolute. "You are the architect. Whether you wish it or not, this world is tied to you. The Sentinel has chosen you to command its systems, and if we are to survive what comes, you must act." Ethan hesitated, his breath unsteady. He had come here as nothing more than an engineer, a human struggling to survive among beings stronger and faster than him. Now the survival of an entire species, maybe more, was suddenly resting on his shoulders. Lyra stepped closer, her hand brushing against his arm despite the chaos surrounding them. Her voice was quiet but unwavering. "You are not alone in this. Whatever comes, we face it together." Ethan met her gaze and nodded slowly, the weight of what was happening settling over him. He stepped toward the Sentinel, gripping the staff tightly as he reached out to touch one of the glowing panels. The moment his hand made contact, streams of data flooded his mind, ancient commands, star maps, defense networks, all waiting for his authorization. The Sentinel's voice softened, no longer booming but resonant, almost reverent. "Command acknowledged. Architect authority established. Initiating planetary defense systems." Around the arena, hidden panels slid open, revealing towering defense turrets that rose like metallic giants from beneath the ground. Energy shields began forming overhead, shimmering layers of light protecting the station from above. Lyra's brothers could only watch in silence now, their resistance crushed beneath the undeniable truth. For the first time, The Cathari understood. The human they sought to destroy was the only one who could save them. Ethan turned to Kalen, his voice steady though his heart pounded in his chest. If we're going to survive this, we'll need every warrior you have and every weapon this station can bring online. Kalen bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect rarely given. Then we fight as one. The distant hum of engines echoed from far beyond the planet, growing louder with each passing moment. Whatever was coming was already close. But this time, humanity and the Cathari would stand together. For the first time in millennia, the architects and their guardians were united again. And as the Sentinel's energy field spread across the skies, Ethan knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning, the end.